and the judges can now introduce themselves.
Hi, good morning. Is it morning where you are? All right, good morning. No? All right, well, good brunch time, I guess. Congratulations on being here. You are, make sure I got it right, Wisconsin wildcard. All right. Wonderful. Congratulations again. It's a tremendous accomplishment to make it to the national finals. And I hope you had a good day yesterday, and we'll try to have some fun today. My name is Ben Glickman. I work for the California Attorney General's office. I'm also an alumnus of this program. I represented California at the national finals way back in 1995. So I've been on that side of then it was the table, today it's a camera, but so congratulations.
My name is Ali Khan. I'm an attorney in Chicago. I too, like Ben, am an alum of this program representing Illinois at the Nationals back in 1998. And again, congratulations for being here. To echo what Ben said, I know it's not always easy being on the other side. So, great job getting here, and it's a lot of hard work. So let's have some fun today.
Hi, I'm Dan Taubman. I'm a senior judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado, where it's still morning because we're in mountain time. So, but I know it's good afternoon for all of you. I'm not an alumnus of the program, but I've worked on the We the People program for many years, and welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Well, hello, judges. It's wonderful to meet all of you. We're the Unit 3 representatives from Wauwatosa East High School, representing the Wisconsin wildcard team. We are coached by Mr. Taylor McDaniel, and I'm Claire Nistler.
I'm Greta Dietzler.
I'm Gabriela Duarte.
I'm Stella Vermeulen.
Great, thank you. So if you're all ready, I'll go ahead and ask the question, and we'll get going. The question should not be a surprise. It is number 2. There is nothing I dread so much as a division of the Republic into 2 great parties, each arranged under its leader and in opposition to each other. What issues led to the formation of the original political parties? To what extent have those issues persisted in American political parties? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a unified or divided government?
You may begin.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. In his letter to Massachusetts delegate Jonathan Jackson, John Adams expressed his strong discontent with the 2-party system. Adams had 2 main qualms: his experience with hyperpartisanship in the Continental Congress and his idea that the cyclical transfer of power between parties would cause any progress to be undone. We concur with Adams' dissent and hold that the 2-party system formed through conflict over the role of the central government between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists has caused political stagnation and gridlock that fails to adequately enact the priorities of Americans. Additionally, the consistent shifting of power has made a unified government the only mechanism for successful policy change. When examining the division of 2 parties, it's imperative to identify the issues that led to their formation.
During the founding period, a main point of contention amongst policymakers was the role of the federal government, an issue that split politicians into the first United States political factions. The Federalists supported a strong central government, whereas the Anti-Federalists aligned with state sovereignty because of their fear for a tyrannical government. Leader of the Federalist Party, James Madison, explained his views on federal power and its importance when he said, quote, "One can hardly expect the state legislatures to take enlightened views on national affairs," end quote. To the contrary, Thomas Jefferson, a prominent anti-federalist, stated, quote, "Our country is too large to have all affairs directed by a single government," end quote.
The power struggle between the federal and state governments has been a persisting partisan issue. In modern times, Democrats favor more federal control, whereas Republicans value state autonomy. The United States has been in a heated debate over whether federal government should have power regarding marijuana regulation, abortion access, gay marriage, civil rights legislation, and most recently, mask mandates and lockdowns. Even with 32.1 million cases and 570,000 deaths from COVID-19 in the US, there's still a power struggle between the federal and state governments on how to handle the pandemic. States such as Texas and Mississippi have recently lifted mask mandates, going against the advice of medical professionals in the CDC. The federal government could, in theory, implement a national mask mandate, as there is no constitutional article or amendment that bans them from doing so. However, this controversy could potentially open the doors for federal government to infringe upon more state powers. Additionally, even with our unified government, it is unlikely that a national mask mandate would be passed through Congress.
In terms of parties, another factor that has grown to be an essential part of government is the difference between a unified and divided government. A government is unified when the legislative and executive branches are controlled by the same party. This allows for fewer obstacles to passing legislation and more accountability. Conversely, a divided government is one with multiple parties controlling the legislature and the executive branch, providing better representation for a broad range of viewpoints to foster discourse. Oftentimes, however, divided government makes it harder to pass legislation or quickly take action in times of crisis. In today's polarized political climate, especially as we are in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, a unified government is essential to meet the needs of the people in a timely manner.
This conclusion, however, rests on the false requirement of a two-party system. A study conducted by Gallup News shows that 67% of Americans see a need for a third party. Countries like Australia, who have succeeded in establishing a multi-party system, reap the benefits of more accurate representation. Australia utilizes coalitions to represent more parties in their government, which has allowed for 3 major parties to maintain a significant voting population. The US also lags behind in offering ranked choice voting. Maine is the only state to have it fully implemented, though some cities have begun to use it on a smaller scale.
When examining the present political division, our thoughts return to the founding fathers. John Adams particularly would be very disappointed. In the future, our country should take the advice from its founders by avoiding a two-party system fraught with polarization and gridlock. We believe ranked choice voting should be implemented on a national level. This will ensure greater and broader representation, allowing for diverse viewpoints, and only then will we truly be united as we the people. This concludes our statement, and we are ready for your questions.
Thank you. Let's pick up right there with ranked choice voting. What are the arguments for and against ranked choice voting? Like what benefits does it create and what problems might it cause?
The benefits of ranked choice voting would allow for more third-party candidates to have the possibility of reaching office. For example, in the 1992 election, Ross Perot won a significant amount of the popular vote, being 18.9%. And this ultimately took away votes from former President Bush, ultimately winning the election for President Clinton. So if we were to implement ranked choice voting, more third-party candidates like this may be able to reach the presidency.
An argument against ranked choice voting is that it invites in tyranny of the minority, as the candidate could win the most votes, the plurality of the votes in the first round, but not reach the majority threshold of 50%. And then in the second round, when the votes are redistributed to candidates, they could end up losing the election, even though the most people voted for them. So some claim it could be undemocratic, as they're not picking the person who has received the most votes.
And what's the, I mean, that seems like a real problem. What's the answer to that? What's the counter argument? Like, or I mean, I guess, is that a problem? Do you agree that that's a problem, that you could have a minority candidate ultimately win?
I do agree that that is a problem. As we see in the UK, there are many examples of people getting less than 30% of the popular vote, but still winning the majority in the House of Commons and getting the prime minister on for that certain party. That limits representation in the government and also limits all viewpoints from being shown. I would say that having a minority party win would really not be beneficial for our country, because they wouldn't be representing a good portion of the country, and they wouldn't be doing a good job of representing the country as a whole.
Okay. A quick question for you. You had mentioned that one issue with political parties could be that this cyclical transfer of power kind of reduces progress. Could you argue, could you argue that having that cyclical transfer of power actually is a feature, not a bug, in the sense that it allows for a peaceful transition of power, when throughout history, having a change of government has usually come from more, what you call violent or unstable means?
I think the cyclical transfer of power leads to some issues, being that senators and Congress members are always in this cycle of trying to push legislation, but also running for re-election. So by having the cyclical transfer of power and having it be just such a fast turnover, I really think does promote the inaction of progress. So I guess I would agree that having this amount of turnover just does not create the best solution for our political parties.
I agree with my colleague. Additionally, we see that this hyperpartisanship has just caused any progress from the previous administration to be repealed. For example, President Biden used his broadly outlined Article 2 executive privilege powers to implement 25 executive orders in his first day as a president, the most for any president. And I think this shows how partisan we've become, that we have to use executive orders to implement any change and get rid of the previous administration's policies. Additionally, I think our partisan politics has actually led us to stray away from a peaceful transition of power. For example, former President Trump refused to accept the election results, and instead of having a peaceful transition of power, he enabled his supporters to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th.
So that's a great point. So I guess what I'm saying is, do you disagree with the theory that if people, if the populace is angry with the current administration, they have an outlet for their anger, rage, frustration in the election process to have a whole new government in there versus maybe, throughout history, the alternative would have been a violent overthrow?
The First Amendment allows people their right to protest. So while in history we see violent overthrows, I feel that the people have a quite an adequate check on the government by having the power to elect the representatives they want and the power of protest as well. So I don't think violent overthrow is necessary in many means, although we do see the insurrection on the Capitol events of January 6th.
So you're agreeing that violent overthrow is the possibility of it is negated to an extent because they have this outlet in the electoral process that it results in cyclical change.
Yes, I would agree. Additionally, like with violent acts and protests, for example, in the Vietnam War, it led to the legislation of the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age. So important acts like this, important like protests like this lead to major legislative change. If there isn't an uprising of some sort, if people aren't making a commotion, then there won't be any change and it'll stay the same.
Great.
I'd like to change gears and go back to what you started talking about regarding the reasons for the creation of the original political parties. Besides the role of the federal government, what other issues led to the creation of different political parties?
Another major point of contention between the Federalists and what went on to be inspired by the Anti-Federalists, the Democratic Republican Party, was the conflict between France and Spain, as the Federalist Party sided with the British and the Anti-Federalists sided with the French. The Federalists felt that we shouldn't support the French Revolution, and the Anti-Federalists disagreed. So this caused a lot of contention in our very first Congresses.
So the parties are very strong at the federal level, but they're even stronger at the state level, right? Parties dominate particular states. How does that impact the three branches of national government? In other words, how does one party's dominance in a particular state, how does that impact Congress, the Supreme Court, or the president?
Well, one of the main functions of political parties is to facilitate policymaking. So even on a smaller government, you can end up making change on a federal one. So for example, the general consensus of what Republican views are, if you have, say, a rural congressperson in rural Kansas, they may agree and make policies with someone from suburban Florida. So what I'm trying to say is that by enacting having coalitions or having alliances with your party members in different different state levels, you can enact federal change on a legislative level.
Oh,
well, I think we've hit time here.
All right.
I'd like to recognize the students for all their hard work. And now the judges have some feedback.
Yeah, it's a nice job. You can breathe. First one done. Congratulate, or I guess last one unless you get on till tomorrow. So congratulations. Yeah, so I thought the prepared portion was good. I thought it really finished strong, and I thought that was the best part once you started talking about the need for a third party, what Australia does, ranked choice voting. The one thing I would suggest there is I'm not sure all judges are going to know what ranked choice voting is. And so it might have been helpful if you had very quickly described how it works and what it does, and then talk about how it might lead to the third parties having more success. But that's a nit. The other nit I'd have in the prepared remarks is you lost me a little bit. And I think it was an answer to the first sub question, but when you were talking about the COVID restrictions and the mask mandates, it wasn't entirely clear to me which part of the question that was in response to. And so just make sure when you're answering that it's always helpful to signposts that are used really strong topic sentences so that the judges on this side have an easier time following you. But that's a minor nit. I thought my question about ranked choice voting, I thought you covered the two big ones. The benefits are it could boost third parties. The negatives are it could lead to a minority candidate ultimately prevailing. And when I pushed you a little bit on that, I thought you had a good example with what Britain experiences in the House of Commons. So I thought that was good. Again, I would have liked to hear how it's working in Maine or San Francisco or some of these other places where they're using it. But overall, I thought it was a good conversation. You guys clearly knew the material, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, first of all, congrats for being here. And like I said earlier, I know it's not always easy being on that side of the, in this case, Zoom. So, again, great job. I think my colleague I agree with everything he said. And just to add a couple things, I really liked your use of some of the contemporary examples, whether it was the COVID stuff or even the 92 election of Ross Perot. I just like the way you try to tie in some of the stuff from, there were issues with, how much power should states have versus, the federal government back then and how it is today, especially again, with regard to COVID restrictions. So I like your use of contemporary examples. And that was something I'd say it shows you have a grasp on kind of current affairs and how they apply. So I really like that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
I thought you did a very nice job. I have the feeling that you have a really good grasp of the question. And if we had more time, I'm sure you could have shared a lot more information with us about the different dimensions of this question. This is one of the We the People questions that's very broad, that some professors spend their whole lives talking about this, and we're asking you questions for 8 minutes. So it's not very much time for you to share what you know with us. In terms of what led to the original creation of political parties, you mentioned the role of the federal government, which is true. And then in response to my question, you talked about the different views towards France and Great Britain, which is also a good point. You might have mentioned, in addition to that, the different views towards the national bank and different economic interests between the two parties that were represented. When you were talking about issues that persist today, I think, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more discussing historically what issues have occurred, because you went from the founders to today, more or less. And there were issues about slavery that led to the Civil War and after the Civil War issues and things like that. But definitely the role of the federal government was an issue from day one, and we can see it today in some of the issues that you mentioned, like marijuana regulation, mask mandates, and abortion, and issues like that. And I'm trying to read my own notes here. Hold on just 1 second. And when you were talking in answer to the question about the cyclical transfers of power and whether that raises concerns, I mean, we've seen that to a great extent, as you mentioned now with President Biden's executive orders on his first day. But the question, one other dimension of that is if there is a divided government, can that lead to compromise? And so sometimes there are compromises and sometimes votes are just taken on party lines. But as I said at the outset, I think you showed a really good understanding of all the aspects of this question, and I congratulate you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, judges. Thank you for participating in this as well. Lovely to have a conversation with you.